BP's claim to have capped the riser and presumably the flow of oil that has been pouring into the Gulf since April the 20th. We'll begin in a moment and talk with Matthew Simmons, one of the world's leading proponents of peak oil, who was an energy advisor to President George W. Bush and is the founder of the Ocean Energy Institute. He has some shocking revelations to share with us today that will soon be found to be true or false. If they are true, then BP has been engaged in a cynical sleight of hand while committing an unprecedented crime against the planet. If Matthew Simmons' claims prove incorrect, then BP is only guilty of the worst environmental disaster in U.S. history. Then we'll be joined by Lisa Margonelli, who is the director of the New America Foundation's Energy Policy Initiative and the author of Oil on the Brain, Petroleum's Long Strange Trip to Your Tank. She will offer her analysis of what may or may not have happened today 5,000 feet below the Gulf. Then finally, we are mandated by the Pacifica bylaws to discuss the upcoming KPFK elections. For the last 15 minutes today, we'll be joined by the local election supervisor, Mark Herbst, to try and inform candidates who might run and listeners who might vote about this process that so far has cost the almost bankrupt Pacifica Network about $3 million of your dollars donated during what seems like increasingly endless fund drives. So stay tuned. A lot of people have a suspicion that that's sort of a red herring, and that there's no way that that pipe that's only 6 to 7 inches in diameter could be responsible for this massive oil spill, and that there is a huge hole in the ocean floor that's been spewing up to 100,000 gallons a day.
120,000 barrels a day.
And what's that estimate based on?
That's based on the best estimates by the oceanographic researchers on these NOAA research vessels, who are measuring the speed of the flow on the ocean floor of this oil and the depth of the lake, and also through satellite, and saying it has to be at about 120,000 barrels a day or it wouldn't be moving this fast.
And interestingly enough, Matthew Simmons, that was the initial estimate, or close to the initial estimate that the Coast Guard gave when they first got out there. They were saying 100,000 barrels a day. So how did we suddenly go down from 100,000 a day to 1,000 and then up to 50,000, and now the highest official figure is 60,000?
Well, first of all, you gotta unfortunately realize that BP did a masterful job of controlling all the information. And since they're the only people that actually have ROVs on the ocean floor, other than the NOAA vessels, who were motherships sending an unmanned submarine down, who couldn't get anywhere near the BP where the drilling riser is, they were totally in control of the news.
So, and ROVs are robotic undersea vehicles, is that?
Yeah, they're basically undersea vehicles, and they're basically, if you wanted to visualize them, they're like a stingray. Mm-hmm. And they have 2 robotic arms on them that basically have 30 pounds torque on each arm. And they have an eyeball that basically looks out 25 feet through a strobe lamp, and that's it. Very limited amount. And BP basically hired all 12 of them to hang around the drilling riser. So what we're seeing on television is the plume coming out of the broken riser. It's about 3 feet high.
And that's above the partially closed blowout preventer.
Now, the blowout preventer is basically miles away. It got tossed out of the hole is basically the exploration wellbore.
I see. So how is then where is the oil that's coming out of the riser connected?
That's actually condensate.
It's what?
That's condensate. This is really hard to visualize because I've had almost have to draw it out. But the drilling riser is basically a big thick pad of elastomer that's put around the drill string, so that as you go down into deep water depths, it doesn't break through currents. But inside the riser is a 6 to 7 inch annular, and when that blew off, it's a mile long. So it would be like having a fire truck fall off a cliff, and basically, the fire hose dangling a mile long is still dripping water.
I see, but there's a geyser going on nearby.
Now, that's not a geyser that you see. We've never seen the geyser. It's a cauldron, but maybe as much as 10 miles away, which is the open hole.
It's an open hole, and
spewing. It was the wellbore, and when it blew, they think basically, I say they, this is the best estimates made by the oceanographic scientists on these NOAA research vessels. But they're having a very hard time getting their voice heard because they're scientists.
Well, there has to be a political explanation, though, for why, if the Coast Guard's initial estimate was ignored and lowballed.
Here was the problem, is that BP basically came out and totaled, and I said, no, it's 1,000 barrel a day leak. And the Coast Guard said, oh, I guess it is.
So you don't think that what you're telling me and our audience here today, Matthew Simmons, is that from day one, 120,000 barrels a day have been spewing out of a hole that is being denied. It's as though it doesn't exist.
Loudly denied.
And all the focus has been on this riser pipe.
Yeah, it was convenient.
That is largely irrelevant.
It's totally irrelevant. And they must have known that basically the nice thing is if they could make people believe that, sooner or later it would deplete, and they could announce that they could cap it. I mean, it's amazing they had that big a problem capping it, actually, because it's so small. Well, there's no way to cap the open hole.
So so let's take them at their word that they've capped this today.
Yeah.
How are they going to deny the fact that there's all this oil still coming up?
Well, they'll say that that's just the residue from the 90 days.
And they're hoping that the relief well will come in and.
Well, no, the relief well can't work because there's no casing. So when they fix it, they'll announce that they've conveniently been able to abandon having to do the relief well.
But how are they going to fix it if they're in denial that it exists?
Well, they're in denial. There's a problem.
And are you saying
they don't have to fix what they deny?
I understand that, but the evidence will continue to flow.
I mean, in about a month or two, finally people will realize that this actually was the biggest con job we've ever seen.
Could be leaking. They're double checking.
And it's already past the amount that's come out that's been acknowledged has already passed the Ixtoc spill back in '79.
Oh, wait. What the researchers now believe is that basically it's between 4,000 and 4,045 feet under the ocean floor lies an oil lake that's about somewhere between 100 and 120 miles wide.
Getting additional vessels with side scan sonars to scan even larger areas just to make sure there's not a leak somewhere else around. Perhaps if there's a fault, a crack in the earth that they know about from their previous seismic that could be leaking, they're double checking this. And I think they're just being very careful at this point in time.
And it's about 400 to 500 feet deep. And it's this toxic, poisonous crude, and it's releasing methane gases that are just absolutely lethal, which is why all the fish and the dolphins and sharks and whales are dying.
And some of the workers have gotten sick,
too. Some of the workers have gotten sick or maybe really sick.
But just to understand the dimensions of this lie and the consequences.
It's beyond belief.
But tell me about Matthew Simmons. Tell me about the relief well. I thought that eventually would intersect the bore that's coming up from this lake of well.
For the relief well to work, what the relief well does is basically the relief well would have been tricky at best because it's going down 35,000 feet and it has to hit a 7-inch target.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have a special tool that cuts a 4-inch hole in the casing. Well, if there's no casing in the hole, it's very hard to cut a 4-inch hole in something that isn't there.
And are we sure that there's no casing?
The government thinks so.
Uh-huh.
Because the Thomas Jefferson has basically gotten now within a kilometer of the wellbore, and there's no trace of any metal whatsoever.
So
in fact, the Los Angeles Times senior writer from Washington published a report a week ago, Sunday, that said that he had government officials sharing with him imagery that from sonar of the fact they think they finally located the BOP, which is 5 stories high, and it had 2 sections of casing that pierced 5 stories of metal.
But they haven't located the.
And he was told that. I called him in the afternoon, and in fact, this is the senior guy in Washington. I said, "How did you find that out?" He said, "Well, Secretary Chu and Secretary Salazar I knew were meeting, and I've become pretty good friends with them. So I said, can I come over and kind of find out what you're up to?" And they showed me the images.
So, but there are no images of the actual blown-out hole that we're talking about.
No, because you'd have to have a submarine go down.
I see.